At first glance, cleaning up spilled molasses might sound almost trivial, sticky, inconvenient, but manageable. Yet the aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood revealed just how disastrously unprepared the response logistics truly were. What unfolded was not merely a messy cleanup operation, but a case study in how poor planning, unsuitable tools, and underestimated scale can bring even the most basic recovery efforts to a standstill. The central problem began with a fundamental misjudgment. Molasses is not water, oil, or even mud. It behaves differently under pressure, temperature, and time. Once released in enormous quantities, it thickened rapidly, clung to everything it touched, and resisted conventional cleaning methods. The response teams treated it like a standard spill, and that initial miscalculation shaped every failure that followed. From a logistical standpoint, equipment choice was the first major weak point. Fire hoses were deployed with the expectation that water pressure would wash the molasses away. Instead, the added water spread the syrup further, pushing it into basements, alleyways, and harbor waters. The hoses lacked both the pressure and precision required for such a viscous substance, turning an already difficult situation into a larger, stickier problem. Manpower was equally misused. Large numbers of workers, soldiers, and volunteers were brought in, but without a clear operational plan. There was little coordination, no rotation system to manage exhaustion, and no protective gear designed for prolonged contact with thick sugar syrup. Workers quickly found themselves immobilized, struggling to walk or even lift their feet as the molasses hardened in colder temperatures. Productivity plummeted, not because of a lack of effort, but because the working conditions made efficiency almost impossible. Transportation logistics also failed spectacularly. The cleanup relied heavily on carts and rudimentary tools to physically remove molasses-soaked debris. Roads became unusable as wheels clogged and surfaces turned slick, slowing movement to a crawl. Attempts to transport waste to disposal sites were painfully slow, creating bottlenecks that backed up the entire operation. Without proper containment or storage solutions, removed materials simply piled up, waiting to be dealt with later. Perhaps the most overlooked factor was time. Molasses behaves very differently over hours and days, especially in winter conditions. As temperatures dropped, the syrup thickened further, transitioning from slow-moving liquid to near-solid mass. The response failed to account for this shift, leaving crews fighting against physics itself. What might have been manageable in the first hours became exponentially harder with each passing day. Communication failures compounded the problem. There was no central command structure capable of adapting strategy as conditions changed. Decisions were reactive rather than proactive, and lessons learned on one street were not effectively shared with teams elsewhere. The absence of real-time feedback meant mistakes were repeated again and again. In the end, the cleanup was completed, but at enormous cost financially, physically, and reputationally. It took weeks to remove the molasses and far longer to erase its presence from the city's infrastructure. Buildings, clothing, and even the harbor retained the smell and residue long after the streets appeared clean. Looking back, the failure of the molasses cleanup wasn't due to a lack of will or workforce. It failed because logistics were built on assumptions rather than understanding. In that sense, the operation serves as a lasting reminder that effective cleanup is not about brute force, but about planning, adaptability, and respecting the nature of the problem itself.